Hi there, it's Jonathan Herbst, founder and CEO of ScaleUp GROWTH. Welcome to our Business Focus series, where I chat with owners, CEOs, founders, and business leaders of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies. So today I'm talking to Klaus Bartosch, who's CEO and founder of Dreamoro Ventures. And I'm going to throw an extra bit in there. Klaus is also a board member of the Melanoma Patients Australia, which I'd like to cover at some stage on the way through. Klaus, it
be delighted.
seems to me something that let's get the word out. So if I missed that, can you remind me, please?
I will find a way. Sure.
Fabulous. Okay, so let's talk about Dreamoro. What is it? What does it do? What do you do? How long have you been doing it?
Yeah, so I came up with the idea and started the company in November 2022 last year, and officially launched the business in January. And it was born off of the back of this is my third startup, and the previous startup I built and worked in over 12 years, listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and experienced everything every tech founder shouldn't have to experience. And it wasn't my first rodeo experiencing a whole lot of both ups and downs in building businesses. And that led me to kind of sit back and go, I've got this amazing team that have joined me in Dreamoro, who I've been working with for many, many years, who have themselves also in some cases been founders of their own businesses. And I'm looking at the kind of markets that tech founders go to build their businesses, what I call, places where they want to bring their dreams to life, which is what we help founders do. And it's just hard. There are venture capital businesses out there who provide a certain level of capability and support to founders, but there's an awful lot that founders don't know and can't do. And that led to us creating Dreamoro. So Dreamoro Ventures and Dreamoro Studio are the kind of two sides of the same coin, if you like, in the sense that one is providing technology founders in the healthcare market and online media market specifically access to investment capital by people who actually understand those markets intimately. And then Dreamoro Studio is a technology and commercialization team to help founders bring their dreams to life. There are so many things that are difficult and unknown, and what we do is really help them navigate the challenges of bringing their ideas to life. 80 to 90% of tech founders fail in the first 2 years. And there's a reason for that. And I think what we've put together in Dreamoro helps address the vast majority, if not all, of what's needed to help tech founders become successful. And so I'm using my last 35 years in the industry to help others actually, become successful businesses and successful founders, and ultimately focused on business initiatives that we've kind of used the UN sustainability goals as a kind of framework for choosing the kind of founders we want to work with. And essentially it's about working with people whose businesses have real purpose. And so we describe that as people whose products have impact on the community, people's lives, and the planet. And that's what Dreamoro is about.
It's interesting what you're saying there. I suppose I'm quite similar to you in what I do. Though I don't have the technology only focus. But that failure rate is not only in tech founders. The failure rate is generally in businesses, across the board. And it's firstly, I've written a lot about it, about how few companies even get above 1 million revenue. Like it's points to all companies that don't get above 1 million in revenue. And it's like you've outlined, it's hard, but there are models to help founders do that.
Exactly right. It's doing it's the first few steps you make on that journey that make the difference between long-term success or failure. You get the first few steps wrong, and you're on a road of hiding for a while to come. Is the simple, sad reality. And most founders have never experienced what's needed to be successful. And For those founders who've been successful, they may not have experienced some of the challenges and difficulties others have. So, it's a really interesting kind of challenge and opportunity.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's all about people, and surrounding yourself with the right people, with the right skill, knowledge, drive, etc.
And that's hard. That knowing how to do that and getting it right is actually really hard.
And in a startup case, finding the cash.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You'd find most startup founders find themselves perpetually raising money.
Well, look, one of my clients who it is a technology. Well, I wouldn't call them a startup now. They would have 35 staff now, but they've been going for about 5 years. But I saw the other day, Dan, the founder and CEO, was saying, to his team how relieved and lucky he is, and he's finally got a team around him that allows him to pretty much focus full time on fundraising.
Yep. No, it's a challenge in its own right. I mean, there are on our website. I wrote a blog, and our website lists the kind of 21 major challenges that tech founders face. And I've listed the top 21. There are plenty more, but there are 21 clangers, and somehow someone needs to navigate those in the early days of their growth and development. And it's just challenging. I mean, I guess if it was easy, we'd all be doing it. So it does take a certain type of person that to become a successful founder, that's for sure.
So, Joey, who is your best client? What do they look like? How do you find them?
Yeah, so for us in Dreamoro, our best customers, obviously they're founders of businesses. They're the ones that we're working with. That's who our customers are, and then they have their customers they're dealing with. I find the best founders to work with are the ones with a very high EQ. People who use their ears and mouth in the right proportion. People who don't have an ego per se. They are confident, but they listen extremely well, and immensely coachable. They understand what they know and don't know. They seek advice from people around them. They listen to advice. They still make their own decisions and calls. But ultimately, they are people who are, driven by the purpose of what they're doing. They're highly committed and dedicated and motivated to do what they're doing. With that comes confidence. Not arrogance, confidence. Arrogance is an evil thing in business. Confidence, and with that's got to come a very high EQ. So I find that founders who don't have a high EQ struggle, really struggle. And so that's I think what we look for when we're working with founders is we're looking for people who we know we can assist, who we know are there and are going to listen.
So at what stage would one of these founders end your universe? My clients, founder, CEO, MD, private company, 10 to 50 staff, located, etc. How would you define that in those sorts of terms?
Yeah, so the way I think about it is, and I think that this is almost always true, but it doesn't have to always be true, which is that typically the founder who we engage and come across is at their seed or seed extension round in terms of raising capital. They may even be looking to do a Series A round. We do seed and Series A rounds, but typically the founders that we're working with who are doing seed have been at it for 2 or 3 years or more. So they've actually gone through the ringer a bit. They've seen some of the obstacles and challenges and become much more aware of what they're trying to do, but have also learned quite a bit about what they're trying to create. They may have defined a MVP well. My experience is most don't. And the reason they don't is because they are limited by the brain's propensity for confirmation bias. Looking for why they think what they're going to build is everything everyone's going to want, versus actually doing the right homework to get the MVP right. But typically they've got deep knowledge in their industry. They've probably got a defined MVP. It may be a reasonably well-defined MVP, or they may have built a prototype of their product. And then we get engaged, and in more cases than not, find ourselves revisiting their MVP definition, revisiting their propensity for market product fit, and really rigorously testing and validating that in fact they do have an opportunity that the market wants. And that's a process. And a lot of founders haven't really got the knowledge and experience on how to do that well.
Do you invest?
Sorry?
Do you invest in the business?
Yeah. So we have a venture capital fund in our business, and so we will invest in the founders that we work with and back, both in seed and Series A capital raises. We'll usually play the major role in that process, but we're happy to, work alongside others where that makes sense.
So switching tacks a little bit, we've all been through COVID. You launched really at the end of COVID, but your experience prior to, what things, actions did you take during the pandemic that have stuck with you going forward?
Oh my God. So what's interesting about that is there was a period in my life some years earlier, 2015, when I listed my company that I founded on the stock exchange. And the 6 months leading up to the listing, I described to people as the most intense period of my career at that point in time. Because not only did we list, but we also did 3 acquisitions concurrently at the same time, just to add to the interest of an IPO. Then COVID came along, and my previous business worked in the healthcare industry. So I had literally thousands and thousands of healthcare businesses that were our clients, who were now sitting at the forefront of dealing with COVID. And the first 6 weeks of COVID was intense. Not just the lockdown, but the fact that we had to move from an office environment to 45 people working all from home, rethink a lot of our processes and systems, and respond to our customers who were dealing with some pretty intense demands and circumstances no one had been prepared for. The outcome of all of that, though, was quite extraordinary, in the sense that while the pandemic was, I think, clearly horrible and terrible to many, and while the healthcare industry has suffered immensely and is today quite exhausted from that experience, there are some really interesting and good things that have emerged from it, including the efficiency with which people can now work from home more. Some may work from home now 3 days a week, some may work home from 5 days a week, but businesses who don't embrace that flexibility aren't going to attract the best people anymore. And the use of these kind of technologies to do video calls has become mainstay. You can now you can hire people. Like, I hired people who hadn't met during the pandemic and hadn't met for a year until later on. And none of that mattered. We doubled down on our team communications, doubled down on monitoring and supporting mental health of our team. We found ourselves doing things that you wouldn't normally be expecting to do. And I think the outcome was we, as a team, grew tighter, supported each other better, collaborated phenomenally better, and in the end, we're 30-40% more efficient than pre-COVID. Not wasting time traveling, not wasting time in meetings that didn't matter, just doing stuff that really worked. And so I think the outcome has been a terrific thing for the industry globally. And it means that now founders can hire people, in most cases, no matter where they live on the planet, no longer limited by geography.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Yeah, there's a couple of points I'd like to pick up there, if you don't mind. Yeah, I've got a team of about, it varies, 11 or 12. I've only met one of them. Most it's Brad, the fellow who does the video editing on this, Vitaly, is in Ukraine, as an example. Geographically, like, I hire based on, yes, it's a staff on demand concept, and specifically focus on different bits. The other thing, if you don't mind, before we started the conversation, you made I found it quite a bit amusing comment that you thought I was going to be American. And the reason being because of the communication that you had with me. And I explained to you that I'm going to give a plug to an app called Calendly. That when Klaus agreed to come do this interview, he booked a time that suited his diary, that suited mine, and Calendly managed that. Calendly then sent out a process workflow, an email straight away. Hey, thanks for joining. You're going to be asked these questions, 24 hours in advance of this call, Klaus received another email. Hey, Klaus, thanks so much. Here are the questions again, just to remind you. An hour before this interview, you got another email. 15 minutes before the interview, he and I both received a text saying we're on in 15 minutes, don't forget. And immediately after this interview, Klaus is going to get an email saying, thanks so much for joining us. It's a workflow that's automated, it just happens. And from what Klaus was saying, he didn't realize that this was an automated workflow that was just happening out there. It's some of the tools that are available out there to make it easy, which is one of the key tenets I coach on, is making it easy for my staff, my clients, my interviewees, etc., to do business with me. It's phenomenal. And that workflow was developed in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant.
Yeah. So what does the future look like? And what do you see as your main challenges going forward?
Yeah, so the future is interesting in that we globally are heading into what is clearly going to be a very difficult set of few years ahead of us. I mean, we've just come out of 2.5 shit years, frankly, with COVID affecting everyone, and we're looking for a brighter future. And now rising interest rates, what's happening in Ukraine and the tensions elsewhere is clearly going to generate and create a very difficult economic environment going forward. And as is the case with those situations, what that will result in is increased mental health challenges for staff and customers that businesses are going to have to manage. The good news is, I think we as businesses have become better at that than ever before, because we had a necessity to survive during the pandemic. And so I think the sensitivity that businesses now have to mental health is much, much higher than it's ever been. And so I think we'll travel through that okay, but nonetheless, it will become an issue, particularly for founders who are looking to build and create businesses in what I think are going to be a much tougher economic environment. Add to that the tougher economic environment. The irony of that is that my experience has been, having been around on this planet long enough, that the tougher the economic environment, the sharper businesses and founders and the opportunities end up becoming. And so the challenge for our business is to kind of manage risk carefully and incredibly well, given those changing economic conditions and environments, and select working with founders and businesses that I think are seizing the day and the opportunity that I'm sure these economic changes will ultimately present for them. So, I think most people have kind of come to recognize that tougher economic conditions actually present new and unique opportunities, especially for founders. So I'm quite excited about the future, and I feel quite positive about the future despite that backdrop. But I guess having been through that backdrop more than once in my life, I'm no longer intimidated by it in the same way that perhaps those who are new to it might be.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I'm talking to a couple of my team about interest rates recently, and the pain they're going through with home loan rates, coming out of fixed terms, etc. And I'm old enough to remember the days of 18% interest rates for home loans, and and give me old enough to remember, or young enough to remember, 4%. That's normal, but it's the stresses that some of these things are causing because the age and experience, which of course is one of the benefits that your experience, my experience bring to our clients. So what do you think has been your biggest learning since you've been a business owner?
Don't chase the money. And what I mean by that is early stage businesses often fall into the trap of coming across customer opportunities that that they see, cash, a cash opportunity when they meet those customers, but those customers are asking for things that are not aligned to their real and original purpose and pathway, and they become distracted by chasing the money, by chasing customer opportunities that actually aren't core to their strategy and core to their product roadmap and evolution. And it's challenging to not do that, especially when you've got a board that might be riding you to get certain outcomes, and you've got shareholders who are interested in seeing results, and you're busy there trying to figure out how to drive growth. And inevitably, you might find yourself chasing the money, which often results in a diversity of product activity and development that is beyond what an organization be focused on. I think staying absolutely in your lane and being very focused on what you set out to do is an important discipline when building a business, and it's a difficult discipline to maintain, because at the same time you're balancing the obvious pivot opportunities that sometimes present themselves, and so you don't want to ignore those opportunities, but by the same token, you don't want to be misled by what I call chasing the money.
Good advice. Good advice. When you think of the word successful, who pops to mind, and can you tell me why?
I had to ponder that question quite a bit. And it was a really interesting and difficult question to think about in terms of an answer to. But I think my answer speaks to what I believe in most of all. So I think of Hugh Jackman as probably what I think of as success. Why? He's intensely committed and hardworking, like phenomenally so. He's so focused at what he does and how he does it. He treats everyone around him graciously and well. And I think takes the approach as he's very trusting and forthcoming, and he makes sure that his time on this planet is going to make a difference. I think he represents an ability of someone who creates around him happiness, who himself, I think, lives a pretty good life, and who has a good and positive impact on the time he spends on this earth. And I think he probably represents, as best as I can think of, as what is success.
Excellent. First time I've had Hugh. And I'm going to throw an extra bit in there as well. Hugh Jackman and his wife, Deborah Lee Furness, are very passionate about something I'm passionate about. They as a couple, have adopted children, and went to bat here in Australia, Deborah Lee particularly, to open up adoption here in Australia. The reason I'm passionate about it is because we have 2 adopted children, and they're outside of what they needed to do. A little bit like, as I said, I want to come back to Melanoma charity, but yes, a great success in what he does, but also lots of sort of hidden things out there as well. So thank you.
Indeed.
So top 3 business books, podcasts, business biographies that you'd recommend?
Yeah, that was easy. I think so. The 3 that are standouts in my mind, because they are profound, I think, when it comes to being a founder and being a good human on this earth. The 7 Habits of Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Yep.
Difficult read, but extraordinarily powerful. Frankly, everything Simon Sinek. His The Why and his Golden Circle forever changed the way I thought about business. When I got first introduced to that, almost 20 years ago now, or more. So everything Simon Sinek, I think his podcasts, his books are just sublime and superb. And last but not least is a podcast series I quite like called Invest Like the Best by Patrick O'Shaughnessy. And the reason why I like that podcast series is he talks to founders and talks about them from an investment perspective and why people might invest in them and what those founders have experienced. And it is a really, really interesting insight in understanding the kind of investment landscape and the founder landscape. And there are some wonderful, wonderful stories in what he shares and produces. And I suspect, your podcast series is doing a similar thing with a slightly different focus. So, that would be my three top picks.
Thank you for that. And it's interesting, some of the key, Stephen Covey, definitely. I was talking to even my children this morning about, his example of rocks and, focusing on what's important. And I've met and I heard Simon speak, and as you say, in fact, I think his TEDx talk on why is still perhaps the most listened to TEDx talk ever.
The last time I looked at 25 million views or more, might even be 70 now, and that was a big number.
Exactly right. And getting that why, it's I wrote a blog about it some time ago, but companies that have a true purpose that focuses their staff and team to get out of bed in the morning and come to work, generally have a 400% greater return than companies that don't have a real purpose. It's and it's like behind you, bringing dreams to life to create your head's in the way of something tomorrow, a better tomorrow.
Doing everything. If you focus on doing everything with purpose, as in there's purpose in everything you do, it's a pretty exciting place to be. Like, it's a good journey, but it's hard to do. It's hard to stay focused that way.
And hard to keep your team focused about talking about it all the time.
Yeah, and I think if you get it right and you get the culture right, you end up with a pretty committed and dedicated team. And as I said, I'm fortunate that I've had a large number of my team follow me into this business.
And my last question, any last piece of advice or parting words to an entrepreneur, an aspiring entrepreneur, tech startup founder?
Yeah, look, I think what I would say is, with everything you do, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, do things that you're passionate about. Life, frankly, is too short, and not enjoy the ride to the end. So focus on doing stuff that you're passionate about. I think at the end of the day, that and surrounding yourself with good people and trustworthy people, that's hard in itself, frankly. So when you find them, hang on to them like brothers and sisters, like gold. They're rare and they're fantastic when you get them. And I think, above all, I think avoid at all cost what I would call customers and partners that drag you into the abyss and make life hell. They may be toxic, but ultimately you don't need, like I used to say to my team all the time, sell the customers you want. You don't need every customer, actually. Just sell the customers you want. Make sure the customers you're working with are the kind of customers you want. Make sure the people you're working with are the kind of people you want to work with. Get all of that right, and life's journey is a better place. And recognize that sometimes you get it wrong. When you get it wrong, do something about it.
One of the hardest questions I ask my clients is to, are all your stakeholders passionate, and would you rehire them all, including customers, clients? And of the ones you wouldn't rehire, well, why aren't you actually sacking them? Clients as well. Yeah.
Indeed.
Excellent. Now, listen, I just want to come back to the Melanoma Patients Australia. Can you give us a couple minutes on that?
Yes, I'm on the board of MPA, Melanoma Patients Australia. The reason I'm on that board is severalfold. Firstly, I am a melanoma survivor. I've had 7, no less. I'm also a leukemia survivor, which is, you shouldn't have to have 2 in your history of cancers, but I have. The thing about melanoma, though, that is different to other cancers is it's a very lonely journey. Most people don't acknowledge and recognize melanoma as cancer. And as a result, when you are diagnosed with it, the people around you don't recognize you as someone experiencing cancer because you don't lose your hair. You typically aren't sitting, going through chemo. There are other things that you're experiencing, usually surgery and usually pretty invasive surgery. But that's over and dusted, within a few weeks. And then you've got the lifetime challenge of monitoring melanoma. When you get it at a later stage, it's incredibly fast and incredibly aggressive. I think it is what Melanoma Patients Australia is about is ensuring that people who are diagnosed and their carers and family don't feel that loneliness that people with melanoma actually feel. Even doctors in the healthcare system don't know how to properly engage and support melanoma patients. When I first went in, I had people coming and talking to me with breast cancer brochures. Well, I had a melanoma. It was completely irrelevant, and they didn't understand. And so that's quite challenging. And that's what MPA is all about: is providing support to patients and carers who are experiencing and dealing with melanoma.
So to find that's Melanoma Patients Australia.
Yes, so it's melanopatientsaustralia.org, I think is .org.au, I think is the URL.
Klaus, thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing many more of your podcasts.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Terrific.